looking, and he's very detail oriented. He likes just putting things together and mixing things. And
I wonder who he gets that from.
I see people still joining, so we're gonna wait maybe 2 more minutes and then we can start. But you can keep chatting.
I was just so happy. I haven't seen Maria in such a long time.
All right, I think we can get started. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to today's program. My name is Yonit Behar, and I'm the assistant curator at the Paul Art Museum here in Chicago. I am so delighted to see you here and that you decided to join us, knowing that there are multiple programs happening this evening. I am thrilled to present Maria Gaspar and Nicole Marroquin, two artists, two women who I admire deeply. Maria and Nicole will engage in a conversation about their feminist mentoring throughout their career, highlighting their gratitude and challenges of women's leadership, focusing primarily on their role as female artists and educators. How do we, they ask, set the ground for younger generations of Latinx artists? Both Maria and Nicole will be featured in the Paul's Art Museum upcoming exhibition titled LatinXAmerican, open January 7th of the upcoming year, an exhibition about both the presence and absence of Latinx artists in the Paul Art Museum's collection. We at the museum, we feel a particular urgency of addressing the lack of visibility, the absence of Latinx artists and voices in museums, and are working towards a lasting transformation. As scholar Arlene Davila writes, and I quote, "Visibility is merely the first step to recognition, which in turn has very little to do with equity. Equity demands structural and lasting transformations in society, and in the context of the arts, in the makeup and functioning of all institutions that are part of a large ecosystem of artistic evaluation from art schools, museums, to galleries, and more," end quote. We are here today with Maria and Nicole as our speakers so that we can interrogate together these particular questions and tensions named above. How did they, as Latinx artists, as women artists, as mothers, arrive at the place they are now in their careers? Who were the key persons that supported them, and who were the people that they called or texted late at night? Who are the mentors and mentees that form their support system? Maria Gaspar is an interdisciplinary artist whose work addresses issues of spatial justice in order to amplify, mobilize, or divert structures of power through individual and collective gestures. Through installation, sculpture, sound, and performance, Gaspar's practice situates itself within historically marginalized sites and stands, multiple formats, scales, and durations to produce liberatory actions. Gaspar has lectured and exhibited national and international venues and is a faculty of the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Nicole Marroquin is a teacher, educator, and artist whose work explores belonging and spatial justice. She researches student uprisings in Chicago public schools between 1967 and 74, with the goal of recuperating the history of youth and women's leadership in the struggle for justice. She presents her work internationally and is also a faculty of the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Last year, she became a Propeller awardee and also received a 3 Arts Project Award for her proposal of raising an invisible monument. We will have time at the end of Maria and Nicole's conversation for questions from the audience, so please feel free to prepare your questions. You will be either able to raise your hand at the end, and I will call your name to ask the question verbally, or if you prefer to do so, you can write it in the chat and then I will read them out loud for you. without further ado, and with much gratitude to these two fantastic beings, I invite Maria and Nicole to take over. Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you, Yonit.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So maybe actually I can start by asking you a question and you can take it from there. We can start by talking about how you think about mentorship. What does mentorship mean for you as a term?
Well,
You want to go first, Nicole?
I guess so, yeah. Well, I've been thinking about mentorship for a little bit of time now, trying to figure out what it means, like as something that I've experienced versus, as a thing that exists out in the world, like the kind of relationship I have to it versus how I envision it outside of me. And I've been thinking a lot about like my foremothers, right? And the people who, whether I know them or not, who have laid the groundwork for me, right? Be they my own ancestors or people I know about or people I've had the luck of knowing, right? Who have done some of the work that enables me to do the work I do. What are you thinking about, Maria?
Well, I've been thinking about it as a kind of compass, to think about mentorship. I mean, I think about guidance. To me, the term guidance feels a bit more, I don't know, like the better term, to guide, to think of a compass as a sort of guide, and that compass can change depending on the location, your location, and how throughout one's life the guidance or the guides change, or they evolve, they shift, because I evolve and I change and I shift, or I think we all do that. It's an organic process. So I like to sort of think about where those overlaps happen, or how those sort of guides, either they're in your life at one point, and then they return again later on in a sort of different kind of way. And I've certainly experienced that with folks who kind of mentored me when I was a teenager in Chicago and growing up in Little Village, and not having a lot of, not really seeing a really rich arts and culture community happen so visibly, and really kind of seeking folks out, but then sort of seeing them again, 20 years later in a different capacity, and connecting again as sort of adults is such a gift, so anyway, I think about that sort of meandering of the way things change and evolve over time.
Yeah, right. Like, and how you might know somebody, but you don't realize that they have done all this work or done all this work before you, or yeah, I know. I think sometimes I recognize mentors in my life, or people who've done work to make me be able to do the work I want to do, when I hit a wall, yeah, or when I am not able to do something I want to do because like I can't find a way to. Yeah, I know. Talking about this generally is like it's hard to do. I mean, I want to rant and rave about fantastic, badass women in my life who are doing the work now. But there's also this thing about mentorship, like the term, that I struggle with, because it seems to have some sort of a built-in age and hierarchy thing built in, like I think about mentorship in the arts and like in guilds, and like there's a lot there.
Yeah, I mean, in your work, Nicole, like such a large part of it is working with young people, specifically at, schools in and around Pilsen. So, I mean, can you talk a little bit about how that has influenced your idea around mentorship, or how, because I mean, when we were talking a couple weeks ago about this, I love that you brought up, this notion of mentorship doesn't have to be age specific. It could also be sort of the young people that one works with, or younger than you. May not necessarily be young people, but younger than you. So I don't know, can you talk about like how you sort of came to that, or how you're thinking about that?
Well, it's gotten more and more intense. So I said I wasn't going to talk about menopause. I won't, but
Let's go there.
doing it. Like right, like I think the better I get as a teacher, the bigger an issue this becomes, which is that I am not here to be necessarily um, the one who's the knower even as much as I have been in the past. Like I've known I'm not the knower for a long time
Mm-hmm.
in a classroom. I'm my role is multiple things. Sometimes it's sort of modeling behaviors, or just being an example of an artist. I grew
Mm-hmm.
up without any um, Latinx women teachers or artists in my life. One man, but that's about it. I really just didn't have people, and
Mm-hmm.
so I take the opportunity to do that very seriously. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I want to be there, for these young folks, and but I'm like more interested in what they think about everything than what I think about things. I'm
Mm-hmm.
and also too the not just people in classrooms, but sort of
Mm-hmm.
all these artists out here that are like, a lot of them are younger than me.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's not necessarily people younger or older. It's just there's a lot of people that know a lot of things that I don't know, that I'm
Mm-hmm.
always sort of hanging around and trying to figure out how to, you know, make
Mm-hmm.
myself available to be told how to do things properly, I guess. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how do you make yourself available for that so that you're not, because you're like a badass. People know that you know a lot of stuff. Like, you know how to get things done, but like, how do you ask for mentorship? How do you get it?
How do you get it? Let's see. Well, I mean, I feel like our friendship, I met you a couple years ago, maybe no, not even a couple years ago. It was a while. It's a while back,
Would you say it was like
almost 10 years ago, maybe.
almost? Okay, yeah,
No,
yeah.
almost, maybe like 8 years or something like that. And I feel like our friendship has evolved because we teach at the same, school, but we didn't always teach at the same school. And that has sort of changed over the years, like now that I'm a parent, I mean, I was I was texting Nicole and asking her like what butt cream she uses for her baby at some point. When my son was born, I was like, what is the butt cream you use, right?
A
But
bouchon.
what are what do you, so figuring out those things. But I mean, your question is about how do you ask for, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I learned early on to ask for help. Um, and I feel like people have been so gracious with me over the years to offer guidance in different ways. And I don't know, I think it's just about about like what you said, is it's about understanding that one doesn't have all the answers, even with you know maybe more experience doing this or that. One can still struggle with some existential questions, or issues that go beyond the sort of work itself and that connect into life. And I feel like those things are not specific to a particular field, but they're sort of rooted in just friendship and kinship and the way, you know, you sort of depend on each other at certain points in one's life. So I don't know, did that answer your question? Is that what you asked
Yeah,
me?
but you also got into something that made me think there's like this whole other thing when you're parenting too. There's like these networks and lineages of kinship, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the thing that happens when you need support around parenting and that you can ask other parents about and ask
Mm-hmm.
parents for. And then, you know, some of it's coming from your experience with your parents. And I mean, there's so many,
Mm-hmm.
it's a web in a
Mm-hmm.
good way.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, um, yeah, I think I heard an artist. She was interviewed recently, and one of the things she said during the interview was, you know, like women artists are always creating. Like women are constantly creating all the time, and it's such a threat to systems of power. And you know, that alone is it's such a sort of tool. And to kind of, how do you harness that, you know, especially as I think about this COVID time, this pandemic moment, and really experiencing, right, the lack of support for parents, and that are, you know, working at the same time, and caretaking, and really struggling with that, you know, myself, right, in my own practice, and trying to sort of manage all of those things. um, it's, you know, and I, you know, keep reading these articles about like women in the workforce, and the workforce is, you know, really affecting women in particular, as they
Mhm.
kind of, yeah, balance out sort of life and work and all of these things. And so it's pretty daunting, you know. And it's certainly, I think that, you know, we recognize that you know, Black and Brown communities are disproportionately affected, especially.
Mhm. Yeah, and mothers. I mean,
Mhm.
yeah, so
On a happy note, can we actually shift?
yes, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Go
all
for it.
right. Let's just okay. Let's see.
I had a question for you about who you are mentoring, or like not necessarily who. I guess when you how do you know like who needs the added support? Like how do you reach out to people? Because I want to give you one example of one thing I did
Okay.
just because I'm noticing somebody is on this call. And it's somebody who yeah, is also younger than me, is just making this incredible work. And
Mm,
and I just, in the same way, when I've had extreme appreciation for some of our foremothers who've laid all this groundwork for us, right?
mm,
Um, I just start talking about their work, right? People ask me what I think, and then I'll just talk about their work. So I'm talking about Victoria Martinez, and so I saw these pictures of her work, and so I just started putting them in my talks and talking about her work in relation to my work, in relation to other artists' work,
mm,
and just started talking about it in a way so I could get conversations going, so I could understand how other people were seeing it, because I was like, you know what I'm seeing? This is really, you know, incredible,
mm.
powerful work that
Yeah.
is, you know, doing all these, you know, it's got all these relationships, but then I feel like in a way that's not really mentorship, that's another kind of
Mm.
support, but like,
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
you know, the
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
pointing at things, right?
Mm. Mhm. Mhm.
Noticing them,
Mhm.
and particularly
Yeah.
for the work of women of color, right, who are
Yeah.
just still
Mhm.
not being seen. I mean,
Mhm. Mhm.
how does that affect your, maybe I guess how does that affect your teaching?
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking of recently a student of mine uh, who I worked with a couple years ago. She was in my performance class, and you know, I think our sort of lives sort of there was a connection. She was from North Lawndale originally, or she's from North Lawndale originally. You know, I'm from South Lawndale originally. And so there were a lot of connections we were making. And I was just so excited to have a student from Chicago in my class. You know, it's always so great, right? And I think students gain so much, you know, hearing about the nuances about life in Chicago and kind of going beyond the areas of the city that are most, you know, known or, you know, trafficked or whatever. And then she ended up, she worked with me on a project in North Lawndale, and you know, she was sort of just, you know, trying to find her footing and figure things out in her artist career. And you know, it was such a kind of open-ended sort of assistantship. It was sort of unclear. I was also trying to figure out what I was doing, so it was a little bit messy. But I think we were both in a place where we're like, well, we're not sure exactly what we're sort of doing, but we're trying to figure this out. And so I don't know, there was a certain kind of mirroring that was happening in that way when I look back. And recently, you know, she just left a museum job, you know, because she was really struggling with the politics of that institution. And I really took that to heart, because it made me really think about, you know, what I teach in the classroom and what I talk about, you know, how am I really seeing that through when a student of mine, you know, is sort of committed to issues of social justice or issues of right, and how do I show up for them in like the real world, not just in the classroom, but out in the field.
Right.
And
yeah.
And so I decided to not only support her, but to support her, you know, her kind of her group that she was organizing with. And it felt like it was the right decision. You know, it felt like it was the right thing to do. And you know, things didn't turn out well for her there, but I was so inspired by her boldness and her clarity, you know, and that's what I was so, you know, impressed by, is just the kind of clarity of vision that she had. And it really kind of, I learned something in that process. And that's what I mean. It's like at some point, you know, she was my student in the classroom, and, you know, I'm interested in critical pedagogy. So of course, it's like, we're always trying to like break that apart. But then, you know, years later, here we are intersecting again. And so how do we, you know, kind of keep building, right? Because I guess it's about, I mean, I always think about it sculpturally or spatially, but, you know, how to like build something. Don't know the shape exactly. Don't know like in what direction it's going to be built in, but it's about just like laying, I don't know, brick by brick or layer by layer, something like that.
Yeah, I was thinking about rhizomes. Yeah, webs is maybe too Halloween-y. It's because it's Halloween. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I've been thinking too, like when I got mentored, like what am I trying to pass on? I think I'm very difficult to mentor. I think people tried, and I'm just like, no.
What do you mean, Nicole? How is that?
I don't know. I've been trying to get some mentorship for ages, and I think like the only people that'll say okay happen to have been, you know, much younger than me, you know? And I'll be like, is this good? And they're like, no. But that's what I want to know, you know. Like I like one of the things I'm really excited about right now is you know, how much young people are changing the conversations, right, that are happening, some of the stuff that's happening primarily online. And, you know, and I am here to be taught about, you know, caring for each other and caring for ourselves and giving each other breaks and forgiving yourself if you're like, I can't move, you know, because they have changed everything about this. Yeah, but that's not the same either, you know. I don't know.
Yeah. I've my niece, who I think is is maybe on the call, I'm not sure. But she, you know, we've been really close, you know, since she was born, and just always had a strong connection. And she, you know, she's in her early 20s, and
Mhm.
she's like getting into music production, and really like finding her own way, you know, and just kind of step by step finding her own way. And you know, we're communicating often, you know, texting, or you know, Instagram or whatever, but definitely kind of there's just a very kind of loving
Mhm.
quality. Of course, she's my niece, so you know, I love her. but but also I think it's a very tender relationship, and I feel like it's you know, constantly finding ways to, you know, support each other, you know. She's great at like checking in with me, you know, how are you doing, which goes a long way, you know, right? Checking in with folks, it goes such a
Seriously.
long way. Like you were talking about, who do you call, right? Who do you call when you're struggling with something, right?
But yeah, this is one of those things that the young people are teaching us, though, is to
Mm-hmm.
be checking in, you know, checking in
Mm-hmm.
with each other, checking in on ourselves, taking the time. You know, I think that's something that my oldest child, Mina, that's what, I'm learning from her. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Okay, so something about, I don't know if this is like me hitting a particular age or something, because like, in the past we've talked about this thing, that like women reach a certain age and then they become invisible.
Mm-hmm.
I'm invisible. But I mean, I've noticed it,
Mm-hmm.
and in some ways, it's like, hallelujah. I hated catcalls. Like that was annoying, but now I'm like, you know, I can move around without being, verbally assaulted and harassed.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
pretty
Mm-hmm.
awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
Something to
and
look forward to, yeah.
oh man, it's great. I know. That's why I'm like, I'm never dyeing my hair. Forget it. I'm so into this. But then there's also like this extreme awareness
Mm-hmm.
I'm having of people that are older than me that I
Mm-hmm.
didn't maybe have
Mm-hmm.
before. I mean, I kind of
Mm-hmm.
felt like everyone was the same age. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Like people seemed a lot closer to the same age, but
Right.
I'm hyper aware of um, some of the struggles that people went through before me
Mm-hmm.
now, and
Mm-hmm.
when they were denied access to things, and I'm just yeah, I'm spending like a lot more time, I think, actually, like it's the subject of my work in a lot of ways now, is
Yeah.
retracing these histories and trying to find ways to
Mm-hmm.
portray these stories and
Mm-hmm.
recording and
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and just
Yeah.
I can't get enough.
Yeah. I mean, can you talk about the project? I mean, you've got several, but the one with Diana Solis,
Oh, well,
because I
funny you should ask. There's the archive right there.
wow, okay.
Organized now. I mean,
Yeah, looks good. It's legit.
provenance and everything taken into account. I didn't like shuffle anything. I just now it's in folders with the
Mm-hmm.
numbers. It's such a pleasure. I feels great. So yeah, Diana Solis, who's just this brilliant, brilliant artist who we have both known. You've known her
Mm-hmm.
for longer than
Oh
me.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, she just spoke at DePaul through their public events a couple weeks ago, I think. Mm-hmm.
just brilliant, right? Like, and I knew her and like had maybe hung out more than done. We might have done something at the Casaslan together. I can't remember even what we did, but that's where I met her. And I didn't know she was a photographer. We didn't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then we did, and then I was just looking through the images of the day that me and Mina went with her to retrieve them from a basement, all of her negatives. And I mean, I knew there would be a lot, but I didn't know there were going to be like that many.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know how exciting and amazing they were going to be. Like there's books about like Chicana feminism or you know, feminist movements in the U.S. And it didn't have those books, like they don't have all of the stories that these pictures have. Like there's so much that is so exciting, and I feel like it's like really energized me to begin to learn about these things and to work on like what the story is with all the pictures and to hear, yeah, but also too, you know, like you can find it. So I'm like very deeply immersed right now in this Saidiya Hartman Wayward Lives Beautiful Experiments book. I'm like reading and reading and reading it and thinking about it. It's different when you know you don't have the person who took the picture who knows the story, right? To have the story and to have Diana, who, you know, this is her life right here, to talk about it is, I mean, it's blowing my mind so hard. I actually am not gonna do a very good job of articulating it, but I feel like, what do the kids say? It's like giving me my life.
It's giving me life.
Yes, yes, I got my life through that. But I mean, it's also in real life, you know. I mean, I got to hear about, you know, history that's of a bunch of, you know, dead white guys all day. And by having to hear about it, I am talking about art history sometimes, you know, and also hearing about Europe all day, or hearing, if I'm studying like Chicana feminists, I'm studying Texas and LA, and no offense to Texas and LA, but like
Yeah.
there's these other stories, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so I don't know, it's just been this fantastic thing, you
Yeah.
know, as a me growing up in the Midwest, like I'm like, where's all the I'm looking around. I mean, have you been to Aurora? Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of us. Like where's all the
Yeah. Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
so disproportionately, you know, that we're just not there yet. I mean, what do you think? What do you
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm thinking about Arlene Davila's book that Yonit referenced at the top of the presentation, and how, you know, important her work has been, and you know, and I've heard her talk a lot uh, about about this work, and I don't know, many other Latinx scholars that young folks also sort of coming up right now, and it's exciting to see. You know, the kinds of conversations that are happening, but they definitely feel yeah, just less visible, more, you know, sort of siloed. And I feel thankful that I've been privy to some of those conversations, but it definitely is not, you know, at the level that that we see when we're in, you know, in academic institution, or, you know, other kinds of, in museums, right? I mean, DePaul has this Latinx initiative, but you know, how many museums are doing this, right?
right?
uh, Probably count them, I don't even know, maybe on one hand, maybe
That
maybe
might be
not.
it.
And so yeah, that might be it, if that. So you know, it's really disheartening to see that, you know. But I was going to say, I mean, yeah, I was thinking about Diana Solis's work, and I met Diana back in the day when we were both teaching at Prose Arts. It was called Prose Arts. And uh you know, I was so happy to meet her and kind of see how she was sort of, you know, living her life, right? An artist's life. She, to me, it was like such an awesome, just to witness how she sort of shaped it, and how she shaped it over the years. And she was really, or she is really tight with Montserrat Alsina, who, I mean, now we're like, well, now we're throwing names out there, but you know,
Okay,
I
I
mean,
know.
we can't, it's hard. It's hard not to, we were trying to avoid it, because Nicole and I felt a little bit like, well, if you like say names and you like don't include others, and it gets weird. So that's why we've been a bit hesitant. But
I blew it
now that we're
beyond naming Victoria. Anyway, yeah.
we're gonna go there, and there's so many, yeah, there's so many people. But Montserrat was similar in that sense, that when I was a teenager, I did one of my first murals with her, and I just remember spending like so much time at her house, like Colibri Gallery. I think she had just bought the building with her partner at the time, and I think they were still kind of, you know, renovating it or whatever. And I thought, wow, to myself, like, yeah, this is amazing, right? To see another, you know, Latinx person or a couple kind of building this life that they want to build. And you know, she was like doing Aztec dancing, and she was teaching art classes from her studio, and she was like mosaicing her second floor, and this was in Pilsen. And I mean, the kind of graciousness and openness that she, you know, she sort of welcomed me into her home. And I really, you know, I have such fond memories of that time. And it really was formative for me, because it, you know, as a young artist, and growing up in a family where, you know, like, you don't become an artist like that. It's like the worst thing you can do is you know, is try to have a career as an artist. That, you know, she was a representation for me that, you know, this was possible, right? And that kind of gave me this outlook that really changed the way I thought about, you know, what my life would be like. So I have so much gratitude to her, you know, because of that. And I think it was also because, you know, this relationship she's I think she splits her time between here and out of the country, but that, you know, between teaching and art making, right, that they were always sort of overlapped and interlinked, and doing sort of community based work. I mean, that was all just sort of wrapped up into one. And so for me, it was, you know, I always had a hard time figuring out how to separate all of those things. Like they're really just sort of integral to,
That's the thing.
you know.
But how would you ever know unless you saw somebody doing it? Yeah, totally. I know. And I feel like I'm like catching up on that right now, what I didn't know how to do, you know,
Yeah.
from like looking at pictures. But I think there's something strange that happens when you're an artist and you also teach. There's something about teaching that sort of like maybe even pushes you even further out, you know, like, I don't know what it is. There's the, you know, all I do is art, versus the teaching. Because like for me, I'm looking for, particularly for people who are teaching and working in communities to show me like, where are we? Because there's even less written about that kind of work, you know, in particular communities too, you know, like in this region in the Midwest, you know, like if I was to write like a I'm not saying I'm going to write this, but if I was to write a book about, you know, Latinx feminists, you know, I mean, start to think of Latinx feminist art educators, right? That my life is intersected with, including you. And then, you know,
put it out there. Maybe somebody in this audience can can work on that.
But like, think Mirta's, like, start to think about these people, you know, and Montserrat and Diana still teaching, like, like these are monumental careers, lifetimes of doing this work, you know. And I feel like that's maybe the next step, something.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that you're you know, that you're articulating that. I see Elvia in the chat saying, yes, name the names. Thumbs get erased all the time. So
Yeah.
all right, we're doing it for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many too. And it's like, you know, finding one more thing out, or finding out that somebody who I hang around with has low key been like a pioneer in this area. You know, Diana, like when I found out you just talked right to Diana. When I found out Diana ran a dark room inside of Mujeres Latinas en Acción, the domestic violence shelter, that she was one of the, you know, very early workers in, you know, like that, a domestic violence shelter as a site of cultural production. They were exhibiting.
Right.
There was also queer women there. Like,
yeah, I mean, for sure. Yeah.
That's like a game changer for me. You know, the way that I think about the role and where it can happen, and where it can happen, like that barriers were just removed for me, even though they had been removed, but I just didn't know about it. You know what I'm saying? I think it's kind of, yeah.
I mean, it makes me think a little bit about since you're talking about Mujeres Latinas, and my aunt was involved in that organization early on too, because she's been really active in the neighborhood. And but I was thinking about the kind of you know, we talk a lot about like murals in Chicago because they're such an important part of the art identity of the city. But I think what gets left out so often is, especially within, you know, the Latinx community, is, you know, first of all, recognizing that there were women muralists working on these projects too, but also thinking about, you know, the community-based public art projects that women were leading and organizing that are often left out because it isn't, you know, it wasn't either like documented, it wasn't up on a wall for an indefinite amount of time. It was there were these happenings, these actions, these a social practice, right, before it was you know, renamed as social practice. But you know, that this kind of organizing or this kind of making was such a large part of the identity of communities that I think we have been working in, and how those folks kind of get left out. So I think I've been thinking a lot about that too, you know, especially as somebody interested in public art or community-based art practice that has such a sort of public function or public, or sort of a, yeah, public interactive element. That's something I've been thinking a lot about, because I'm interested in my own practice in like the fleeting, the ethereal, you know, kind of pushing up against notions of, you know, permanence and these kinds of things. Like how do you like yeah, you know, how do you kind of evoke or provoke these ideas that may be more long-term than something on a wall, let's say, right? So I mean, just my own kind of interests right at this moment. But so anyway.
Yeah, but I also think like
oh, sorry,
teaching that way too. You know, I think about teaching that way too as being sort of in that mode, you know, if
Yeah,
you think about
exactly.
like
Yeah.
the classroom as a potential work of art, or as the teaching itself as the work, right?
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah.
you know, just to name another name, Malu Ortega, who painted that mural at Benito Juarez, right? Of course, she's in Mexico City. I was like, what do you think about this? She was like, oh no, my teaching is my art now. I was like, let me talk to you more, you know, like,
yeah.
been
I think that's a good point to open it up for questions or comments, just a conversation to open it up to everyone that's here in the Zoom world. I would love to invite you to also turn on your cameras, just if you feel like it, but I think it changes just to see our faces and feel like we're in the same room. And the way I suggest we do this is either you raise your hand on Zoom and then I'll call your name and you can unmute yourself, or you can write the questions in the chat and we'll read them. But I will.
Yeah, we didn't get to talk a lot about love, but you know,
yeah, I was gonna yeah, love, right?
Yeah, that's like at the core of this, right? Like that's the motivator, that's the gas in the tank that's pushing it forward.
Yeah, I saw that I saw Sylvia make a comment there, and I was and so when you said love, and I was like, oh, Sylvia. Sylvia Gonzalez, who, you know, is an artist and educator, and that I feel like totally embodies this sort of love for people and love for young people, and that has been really inspiring to me. And you know, the sort of way that she, you know, in a way it's sort of this sort of you know, elegance sometimes has like a bad connotation, but I really mean it, like a kind of thoughtfulness and elegance in which she like works with others and works with people is something that has been really, you know, inspiring for me.
So there's a question in the chat that I'm going to read from William Estrada. And William asks, what recommendations do you have for young artists who are interested in working within their communities, engaging people in their neighborhoods, and what type of art making they want in their streets? How to engage in critical conversations, manage toxic power structures, honor existing legacies, and how to create spaces for themselves so the work is sustainable.
Oh, those are a lot of questions.
I don't know who yes. who would like to start?
I don't know. I just think like the crisis of like out of balance, lack of representation is so in the front of my mind. And by like raising that initial um name when I was like, oh, let's not say any names, and then I was like, oh, Vicky, but like just talking about art that you know about that is made by people nearby, and raising up the names of these hardworking women artists who are out here, is a great, huge first step, because there's so many people out here. I'm actually thinking of people that were actually, Paulina Camacho's students. Now there's like a total badass, and
Yeah.
who are also very likely, Vanessa Sanchez students, and like,
Hmm.
these folks have already been sort of like, you know, like they're already in these sort of powerful energy filled zones because they've got, I don't know if it's mentorship. I think they've had such good modeling. They've seen examples of amazing people, right? And you've worked with some of them, and I mean, they've got examples around them
Hmm.
that they can see, but not everybody gets
Hmm.
to see it. And I think one
Yeah.
one solution is to just point at and
Hmm.
and raise up those voices and get those names out there of some of these folks doing the work.
Hmm.
What do you
Yeah,
think?
I absolutely agree. I mean, that's something I often tell students in my classroom where I teach, when you find a mentor, somebody you admire, like become friends with them, like what are they up to? What are they doing? Just connect with them, hold on to them, I mean, I'm still good friends with my first Latinx professor in, in undergrad, Ernesto Pujol, um, who is also a feminist, who was really important to me in my undergraduate work, where, it was a super conservative traditional art school in New York. And the only discussions we could have in school were about Clement Greenberg and abstract expressionism. I mean, that was it. That was what. So anything that surrounded like storytelling or narrative or social justice, like forget it. You were ousted. And Ernesto was such a important, like, he sort of was like, it's okay. These people are crazy. So it's just so
Mhm.
I think that, and I sort of latched onto him, and I have yet to let go. And now we have a pretty great relationship. And so and it's been almost 20 years, I think. So I would say that when you find somebody, keep them close to you, because these people might eventually become your friends, and or your colleagues or whatever, but that relationship can grow into something that is so long lasting.
We have another
Oh,
question
let
in
me
the
let me say
chat.
one let me say one more
Okay.
thing really
Hmm.
quick. I was gonna say, there's this thing, the way that I think, because I'm super enmeshed in art education, and like it's really easy to think about art education as lineages, right? So if you were to think about like if it was families, right? Like there's all these connections, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
if I think about like um, people I studied under and people they studied under, and then and for a kind of a series of uh, I think it's really recent. I don't know. It's going to pop up in this like little mini slideshow if we even get a chance to do it. I don't know if we will, but there's these lineages that are starting to be built that I
Mm-hmm.
think are like an incredible shift, right? Like I'm telling you, I never had anybody, not a single Latinx feminist teacher until graduate school in real life. Like I never had
Mm-hmm.
one. Like like I had a Spanish teacher who was Italian. That was the closest I ever got, believe it or not. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, yeah, I think that now that these lineages are getting built, like they become like permanent bonds. You know what I'm saying?
Like
Where
family trees. Mm-hmm.
it's like to me, it's
Mm-hmm.
not just like, oh, they were in my class or I was in their class.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
something way more serious when it's
Mm-hmm.
when it's us. I don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It feels really permanent. Anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's a question from Lillian Lewis. What advice would you share with white educators who want to support and mentor Latinx students?
Actually, I was just actually thinking when I was thinking of you and Vanessa, and I think there's a couple of phenomenal um, Latinx feminist women that went to Whitney Young and had
Mm-hmm.
this really brilliant
Mm-hmm.
art teacher, Lisa Wax, who seems to have just done really phenomenal things and been a great mentor to many people. I'll tell you what, though, yeah, right? Yeah.
Lisa Wax, yeah, she was my student teacher when I was there because I'm a little, yeah, but she was, yeah, she's amazing. And I actually had Nancy Clark, Miss Clark, who like took all my photographs to get into art school.
Awesome.
She was like helping me put my portfolio together. But you're right, Whitney Young certainly has a, I don't know, there's some magic happening there for sure
Hmm.
at that
Yeah.
school.
She
Yeah.
loves the hell out of those students. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, can I come student teach in your room?" She's like, "I'm with my students." I was like, "Woo, awesome."
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, like bringing in people to teach.
Mm-hmm.
She was like, "Oh yeah, let's talk about your work though with them,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and making connections and staying in touch,
Mm-hmm.
staying in touch with our students for long periods of time, um, and uh, and talking about life after school in a way that is really supportive. I don't know. My
Mm-hmm.
suggestion is again, is just teach about these artists, teach about the women that are out there doing the work, like do the legwork and get those slideshows together
Mm-hmm.
and you know as much as possible, like art educator, I would say like make sure that you do that inventory of what you're teaching in your curriculum and that it is reflecting the world you want,
Mm-hmm.
like who do you want to lift up, and to just find the artists that are doing the work and
Mm-hmm.
get it out there. And like, it can be people that I think there's an incredible power of teaching
Mm-hmm.
people that are
Mm-hmm.
teaching artists that are from a place, right? That people.
Yeah, yeah, the only thing I would add, because I think that's right on the money. The only thing I would add is, I for a while I would invite like even just upper level students to come to my first year class and present on their work, because a fourth year student would present in my first year course. And I feel like, students really, and there were students of color, right? And who I would invite, it was like great experience for them because they'd have to sort of prepare something. And the students loved it because they saw themselves and, the student was just a couple years older, a couple years ahead. And so, whenever I had a student that I felt was making really powerful work and, especially BIPOC students, I would certainly really make an effort of sort of inviting them in to share the work and really kind of engage students. So, yeah.
Yeah, totally. And when you have Latinx uh, young women and queer people in your classes,
Mm-hmm.
do your best teach so many Black feminist artists too, because
Mm-hmm.
like for many of us, like those are our models, right? In the absence of a
Mm-hmm.
history of us,
Yeah.
like that's
Yeah.
who I'm looking at. And also too, as we know,
Mm-hmm.
that's where we're gonna make
Mm-hmm.
headway, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
through
Mm-hmm.
building
Mm-hmm.
strong coalitions between us,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So making that visible, right? Studying their
Mm-hmm.
accomplishments
Mm-hmm.
and working towards
Mm-hmm.
teaching that in an equal way instead of
Mm-hmm.
or only,
Mm-hmm.
which is a great way to repair past damages. I think
Mm-hmm.
um, is another way too.
Does anyone want to ask a question verbally? I don't have to only read it in the chat, so you can also comment. Yes,
Nicole, do you want to show
Sylvia,
your pictures?
Sylvia.
Oh, Sylvia.
Okay. Sylvia had a question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Oh,
I don't
sorry,
have a
Diana. You
question.
go next.
Oh,
I was gonna say I don't have a question so much as I just want to say that both of these magnificent people have been such a huge part of my growth. Maria, I've known since I was at Marwin when I was a youth learning art at Marwin, and then we reconnected with the 96 Acres Project, and I think even when I was a teen at Marwin, I remember thinking, wow, this is a Latina doing art, and she looks like me, she speaks like me, she understands my experiences. I remember going home and telling my mom, there's this like Mexicana teacher who's like, who like gets it. And my mom was like, oh, you have an art teacher that's Mexicana? I was like, yeah. And then just to think like where I'm at now, just to know that Maria and I have collaborated. She invited me into the 96 Acres Project, the education committee, and I learned so much about even redirecting my framework for teaching and how you unpack power dynamics in the classroom and the need to talk about and sort of unveil that. But the magic for me is how to unveil that with tenderness and with care, knowing that you have the best interest in mind for your students. And I feel like I really saw that modeled and projected by Maria. So for me, to continue to carry that critical pedagogy forward with tenderness has just been such a huge lesson for me as an educator. So I just came by to throw some shine over at Maria Gaspar and Nicole Marroquin, who helped me write that thesis. But thank you both for being such people that the community can really look to and feel connected to in a very humble and humbling way. So that's it. I'm gonna.
Wow, and then we have Diana. I want to have enough time for Diana to ask her question as well.
I think I forgot my question, but I just wanted to say, yeah, I mean, totally agree 100% with both Maria and Nicole and Sylvia. I think for me, I'm learning so much from the young people around me today and giving them their space and voice. But in my classroom, when I teach, I think it's the most important lesson I've learned throughout the years has been centering our voices, centering those voices of women, of Black women, feminists, and queer and trans people in my classrooms with my students, which I'm actually doing today at Juarez again, which is a great experience through documentary and photo documentary work and creating something different. A lot of these students are super pumped up by what they're doing and starting to look at their lives a little differently within, you know, the different contexts in which we live in today. And I can never say enough about that because giving the voices of the people that I grew up with and others, giving them voice in our classrooms has allowed to have people like Maria, like Sylvia, and others to do amazing things, you know. So I'm truly blessed that way for having known you all. And I'm still around kicking, okay?
Yeah.
That
keeps us in check.
Yeah, do they know how lucky they are? That's great.
I think that's a great point to end this conversation. I want to thank Maria and Nicole and all of you for being here and for your great comments and hearts and love on the chat. And I hope that you join us for future programs featuring Latinx artists at the Fall Art Museum. So thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Have a good night. Have a good evening. Thank you, Maria and Nicole.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean,
we've never had a. Hey, there's Amanda.
Ah!
Let's see that belly.
It's too low. We have the laptop on here.
I thought you were gonna say yeah.
We're gonna take over the Zoom now.
Oh my
I'm
god!
rubbing your belly. Oh.
So cute.
Oh,
You're due any day now, right?
next, like in 2 weeks.
Oh my god.
Oh, in 2 weeks. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I thought it was like, I literally thought it was like 5 days from now.
It's close. It's the 25th.
Okay. Okay. But yeah, you'll never know.
This was
Not to scare you.
This was great. This is what I needed this afternoon, evening, was to hear you all talk about amazing things.
Aww.
I
So
keep
nice to
getting
see
very emo about this. Oh.
Me too.